Flannery O'Connor was born in 1925, born in Georgia, lived most of her life there, although she did go to she went to an all-girls school in Georgia, did very well, went to Iowa writing school, one of the famous writing schools in the United States at Iowa University. Went to the writer school there, was seen as a kind of a little bit of a misfit herself, not in that she was acted any way wrong. She was just a little odd. She had a thick Georgian accent. In fact, there's a story when she first went there that she went for the interview to get into the writer's workshop, and the person in charge was talking to her in his office, and she had such a thick accent he couldn't understand her. So he said, "Could you write that out?" And so she wrote, would write her answers out to his questions, and then they would communicate that way. Eventually, her accent was not as pronounced, and she was able to be understood. It was very clear while she was in that workshop that she was a gifted writer. And after that, she went to New York to, I believe it was Yadu. It's a special place for artists to just focus on their work and write. It's kind of like a community of artists. And she went there for a year or so. But her father, when she was a teenager, died of lupus, got lupus and died within a couple of years. She, in her early to mid-20s, was diagnosed with lupus, realized that she couldn't stay away from her home, went home back to Georgia, lived with her mother. In many ways, that has given her a voice, because you can see in her story she talks about common people in the South, as she's a Southern writer. And so she couldn't work many hours. She'd work 2 or 3 hours in the morning, spent the afternoon. She loved birds, and she would raise chickens and ducks and turkeys and all just different kinds of birds. But particularly she liked peacocks, and so she raised peacocks. But she was in and out of the hospital, went to church every time she could. She was a strong Catholic in the Protestant South, so kind of an outsider there as a Catholic, but a strong Christian writer. And so you can see elements of this sickness that haunted her all the way through her life, even though she was a Christian. And she died at 39 of lupus, working on that last story, Parker's Back. Actually, the doctor said, don't work on it, and she would hide it under her pillow, and when he was gone, he'd bring it out and be editing it, and she was very fastidious in terms of her editing and that sort of stuff. So you can see that in the last 9 years of her life, even when she was giving some of the lectures that you read, a couple of them, or short stories, but the lectures, she was on crutches and spent the last 9 years of her life on crutches. So died at 39, same age as Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and you read him earlier in the semester. Her writing was not very, as I said before, sentimental, because she was trying to write to an audience that, for the most part, I think at one point she says, did not believe in fact or faith. What she thought was the beginning of the secular movement in the United States, and that she needed to write to that modernist mind that believed primarily in reason and de-emphasized revelation. And so she said, when you write to somebody that doesn't believe in the authority of Scripture, that doesn't believe many things the church does, trying to jam that down or tell sentimental little stories of how warm Christianity is, doesn't get their attention at all. They turn it off. So those kind of movies, those kind of stories, those kind of media are ignored. And she was trying to be heard. So she's not writing for the Christian audience so much as she's writing for people who do not really believe in Christianity. How to get their attention then? How to smuggle, as Lewis would say, Christian theology and truth into those stories. And so if you read A Good Man is Hard to Find, those last 3 pages are just full of profound questions. And those questions are about God. They're about, what is the meaning of life? Why do I live? How do I justify all the evil I've done with all the good that I'm trying to do? Or the judgment with all the good, as the misfit was trying to do. What does Jesus really mean? What if I would have been there? Would I have really known him? Those are all there in their stories. And even though the stories aren't comfortable, they're not meant to be comfortable. They're meant to provoke thought. And they're meant to be taken seriously, and not one of the consequences of Christians, all of Christians not all, many Christian testimonies and many Christian people who are artists with Christian concerns, is that their stories always end wonderfully. They end, the sick get well, the lame walk, the poor are rich, those kinds of things. And she says the problem is, that's wonderful when it happens, and it certainly can happen, and she would hope it would happen to her. But the fact is, many times, most of the time, that doesn't happen. And we all know that that's true. We all have, and so she said, if we tell stories with that sentimental, that everything's going to be better, everything's progress, that, of course, modernism holds that same assertion out to us as well. She said, people know that it's not real, and so reality is the casualty of those sentimental stories. So she says, I need to tell stories that provoke thought and thinking, and that people will be drawn to. Maybe I won't give them the whole thing. The whole part of indirect communication that she is an example of is that you don't give them all the information. You give them enough and point them in the right direction and let them untie the knot. Let them figure out what the story really means. And so she's doing that. And in so doing, she asks these provocative questions that continue to haunt people long after they've read her story, and many times force themselves back to those stories and to seek out answers. And they believe these stories are real because they know they are addressing the same kind of problems that they see other Christians in life addressing, that they themselves maybe aren't Christian, but do address as well. So it provokes thought, it causes them to really think seriously about questions most people want to ignore. Most people are amused and want to amuse, or not think seriously about the kinds of questions. In every one of her stories, she has those serious questions. I'll talk a little bit about that. I just want you to watch out for those questions in the stories, to realize that she's not trying to make you feel good in these stories. She's trying to provoke you to take seriously the issues that she brings up in there. And also remember, too, in every one of her stories, there is the offer of grace. Now, it is subtle. It is very, very subtle. You don't always see it. Sometimes you'll miss it. Sometimes you wonder. But if it provokes people to think over and over again, it might begin them on their own journey to finding Christ. And that is exactly what she wanted to do. Now, her own mother didn't like her writing that much. She thought, why can't you tell a nice, calm, and clear story? She would get letters from readers saying, I get home, I've worked all day, I'm really tired, I need something to comfort me. Well, that's not the story you pick up. That's not the book you pick up. She was trying to provoke serious thought about reality. And in their stories, she exaggerates, but in their stories you can identify with these people, because those are the same kinds of questions deep in our heart that Christian or non-Christian, we're all really asking. And so, hope this helps you. Do get and respond to that, and I'll come back and talk about each one of those stories next week for you. Okay, God bless. Bye-bye.